Hi, this is Dr. Richard Abbey. I am from Abbey Neuropsychology Clinic in Palo Alto, and I'm going to tell you today about the difference between the school approach, a school assessment approach, public school, and a neuropsychological assessment. So depending on what part of the country you're in, or maybe it doesn't really matter, many of the schools have gone to what's called response to intervention. So if you bring the attention to the school, that you're concerned about your child, they may or may not kind of take a closer look. Here's the secret. Here's the biggest secret that I'm going to share with you today. Now, if you put your concerns in writing, like I'm concerned about my child's, whatever it is, reading, and I would like an assessment to see if they need extra help and interventions. Once you do that, and it's in actual writing, the time clock starts ticking. So depending on where you are in the country, they only have a certain amount of time where they're allowed to seek the answers out. If you don't put it in writing, they actually aren't required to do anything. So one of the things they may do to be helpful is to see if your child does in fact have like a reading difficulty. Maybe they've identified this through doing some simple tests, like they'll give a sheet called Dibbles, and so that's a sheet of words that would be appropriate for their grade. And they would see, if they're able to read those words at a certain rate and how many errors they make and, what they're able to do with that. Whatever the assessment, it might be a little mini assessment, they may determine that that your child may need a little extra help. They may have a teacher's aide that could, do some work within the classroom. They might do some interventions, some what we call pull-out services. So take them out of class when maybe it's a time where they can miss. And when they do that, it's really important to do that at different times of the day. So, maybe if it's on Monday at 9 o'clock, they're not missing, maybe that's when math is always done at 9 o'clock on, Monday through Friday. So if they are pulled out again on Thursday, maybe it could be 11 o'clock when there's a different activity going on in the school, like maybe that's library time or something. But it's really important too that your child has well-balanced life. So if this is during their favorite time, maybe library is a really favorite time of theirs. Maybe it's during gym class or some other really fun activity. They actually shouldn't miss out on the fun stuff either, especially when a child is having difficulties. It's really important that they do things that are fun, that make them feel good about themselves, so they maintain their self-esteem. Now, if your child is not responding, then you can ask for a more formal assessment, and they may do some things like read a broader word list. They may do some intellectual testing. Now, the problem is in a school system, they generally don't have funds to help everyone. And so, they're doing their best. Educators love helping children, and they do everything that they can do. But their ability to look in depth as to what's going on is limited by two things. Number one, resources, and number two, having the people on staff that would actually be able to look more in depth. So a PhD neuropsychologist is going to look at all aspects of your child's cognitive functioning, whereas most school psychologists are going to do a good job of doing intellectual assessment and kind of doing some screeners for reading, writing, math. But here's the thing. Those types of things may kind of look at the surface, so maybe they identify some reading things, and so they start doing some reading interventions. Maybe they start focusing on some similar relationships or reading fluently. So that's the extent that the school can do. They can do their interventions that are very scientifically based, that tend to deal with the surface types of things, the things that you can see, like doing math or reading or writing, but it doesn't get to the underlying functioning of what is actually the root of the problem. That's where a neuropsychological assessment goes into greater depth and breadth. And the reason why you would want that is because then you need to have a better understanding of what your child's brain is doing that is causing those difficulties, right? So if we can just come to terms with, essentially what that means is there's certain parts of your child's brain that aren't maturing as fast as other parts of their brain. And so from a functional standpoint, when you do certain tests like nonverbal intellectual reasoning versus verbal intellectual reasoning, those things should be fairly even and well developed. And so let's say that's uneven. Well, what I tend to look at is the one that's lower is opportunity, right? It's not like, oh my gosh, now there's something wrong with my child. I look at it as, well, from a strength building approach, we can strengthen those areas of weakness, bring them up to the areas that are optimized. So what does that mean? You have to look at some of the things and just admit, like, there's some things that are lagging in development that are causing some relative weaknesses that if we intervene early, we have the knowledge, then we can help my child get better faster and be able to do things like read, write, and do some math. So what would those things be? So let's just say the verbal, nonverbal, intellectual functioning are about the same, but perhaps you have a relative weakness in working memory. Now, you may say, well, my child doesn't have a memory problem. It's not what we're talking about exactly. Working memory is your ability to hold information in mind and mentally manipulate it. So that could be long strings of information of numbers or words or, so where does this come up? If you're doing mental math, some kids are really good at math, so they can do that really well. But then if you start getting into an area of weakness, let's say, reading's kind of hard. And so they're reading, and because it's so hard, they're having a hard time decoding the words because they do it very often, but there could be other reasons for that, right? And we'll dig into that in a minute. But because they're having such a difficult time reading, they're exhausting their online, kind of like the RAM of the computer. They're exhausting those attentional resources, the working memory resources. So it's really hard to just kind of read the words on the page. And therefore, it's really hard to comprehend because there's not a lot of attentional resources left over to comprehend what we read, to make inferences, to think about like all the characters and what they're doing and what's going to happen next, or to get the overall theme of things. So, if we return to attentional resources, that could also cause problems with reading and math and writing, because, for example, in reading, if you're not paying attention to all the information, you didn't get it all in. So now we have comprehension problems for a different reason. It's not because reading is necessarily hard. It's because focusing and paying attention is hard. Now, one of the things that people get mixed up on is, well, my child, there's no way my child could have an attention problem because they can play video games for hours on end. Okay, so really what we're talking about is attentional control for things that probably aren't intrinsically interesting, like maybe their history or maybe, doing their math homework. So if they come home and, a 15-minute homework assignment ends up being like a 2-hour battle just to get them to do it, get it done. Some of the other signs, their room is a mess, their book bag is a mess. They did all their assignments, but only turned half of them in. The ones that they did turn in, they're making errors, maybe on their math, they missed a sign here or there, but they understood how to do it. Maybe they had all the material down for the spelling test, and they show up and they got half of them wrong. Or you thought you would help them learn all the capitals on a map, and suddenly that information is gone on the test day. There could be some things going on there. Some kids actually, instead of attention difficulties, they have anxiety. And so, all the things that they went into the test and they knew, they quickly forget because emotionally they get really nervous. Uh-oh, I think I just lost my camera. I'm going to come back. Actually, I have another battery somewhere. Oh, there it is. So if you hang tight, I'm going to switch it out. Apparently my battery got tired. But, you know, it's always good to have a backup, backup battery. Too bad our kids can't have a backup battery like that. Just gonna replace the battery and have some more energy in our brains. So then, you know, you're kind of, well, that would be nice to know what's going on. So when you look at a neuropsychological assessment, we talked about like relative weaknesses in working memory, maybe compared to intellectual, verbal, nonverbal reasoning. We could also have relative weaknesses in processing speed. So there could be some inefficiencies there. Now, if you look deep down into the brain, like, well, why would that be? The frontal lobe or the prefrontal cortex, oftentimes what we see is the neurons fluctuating at a slower rate than their peers. So usually you see somewhere between 4 and 8 hertz this predominant slow rhythm in the frontal lobes, compared to peers that, you know, those neurons are fluctuating between 12 and 15 or 15 and 20 hertz because they're high performing. So it's kind of like driving down the road in your car in 5th gear going 20 miles an hour. Like, you're not going to get the most performance out of your car. You know, you got this great, you know, sports car like a Porsche 911, and you got this big, you know, steering wheel like a big old bus steering wheel. Like, you're not going to get the performance out of it. So it's not that, you know, the car, there's anything wrong with the car. It's just that there's some things that could be adjusted so you could get the performance out of it. And the same with your child. If they're having some relative weaknesses in working memory or processing speed, or even, you know, you go into the academics and you start digging in deeper, like, okay, why are they having difficulties with mathematics? You know, it could be partially with the working memory. It could partly be due to the executive function. So you start looking into the executive functions. So parents are, you know, filling out forms talking about how their child can your child, ask yourself this question, you know, how is my child at planning? Do I have to tell them about assignments coming up? You know, how is my child at organizing? Like, what does their book bag look like? Are they able to hand in assignments on their own? Is the teacher kind of constantly looking for their assignments and they're missing assignments and things? You know, are they able to, where you really start seeing trouble in this area, 5th to 6th grade, or, you know, depending on what school you're in, and you're supposed to write a paper with a topic paragraph and 3 supporting paragraphs and concluding. Like, do you have the executive functions to generate all the ideas, to succinctly, you know, outline them? To each paragraph has an introduction, supporting information, conclusion, transitions. Are you able to do all those things, or do you need a lot of help? Is that overwhelming? For little ones, it could be like, go clean your room, and like they can't even do it because that task is way too involved. So think about some of these things and how they may be affecting your child. Think about, you know, more broadly, how would that information be helpful? You know, with the executive functions, what we see in the brain. So you can actually image the brain in the office. It takes about 10-15 minutes to look at the activity that's going on in there. Oftentimes we see underconnectivity in the brain, and that can lead to super helpful interventions. I'm going to be back on a little bit and give you a little more information about what you can actually do about these things that don't involve medication, that actually uses your child's own resources to build up those areas of weakness, those areas that are lagging behind, and to catch them up to the ones that are already optimized so that they can overcome their attention difficulties. They can overcome their executive function areas of weakness. They can become proficient readers and writers. Really exciting stuff, and I'll talk to you in a few.